My name is Dave Emerson, and I'll introduce myself a little bit more in a couple minutes, but I'd like to offer a short embodied practice for us in case you're interested in participating in that, just a way to get oriented in your body. And it's completely optional. So you are welcome to engage with this in any way that you like or not at all. So if you like, maybe giving yourself a moment, however you're oriented, the possibility to start to add some movement. So one option for moving could be beginning to shift from side to side. You're welcome to have your eyes open or closed. It's your choice. Camera off or on, your choice. If you're interested in adding some movement, one way you might start to shift from side to side. You could also make that movement more circular, more of a circular movement if you want. If you're starting to move, you may begin to feel some sensation in your body. Possibly around the parts of your body that you're moving. You can choose the size of any movements that you're making. That's your choice. So possibilities here, and you may have discovered something here that you want to stay with, or if you like to try a couple of other ones, option for a neck movement. And one way you might move your neck could be turning your chin or rotating from side to side. Another option for a neck movement could be dropping your chin through the middle and then rolling across. So rolling from side to side. At least those two possibilities, but you might find or discover another way of moving your neck. Maybe beginning to feel some sensation around your neck. And again, you may have discovered something you want to stay with here. If you want to move to maybe another one, we could possibly try two more. Option for some shoulder movements. And one way you could do that is rolling your shoulders, either forwards or backwards. So a possibility there. Another way you could move your shoulders, maybe elbow circles. So at least these two options, you might be interested in both of these. You may be interested in one. It's your choice. Or maybe you discover another way of moving your shoulders. Again, the size of any movements here is your choice. You can make the movement any size you want. And again, you may have discovered something you want to stay with. If you want to try one more, possibility for a side stretch, and at least two ways to do that. One could be reaching up to the space above you, extending up. Another way to do this could be leaning across or arcing across. So you could stay upright and reach to the space above you, and that may be it's an extension in your side or sides, or you could lean across, your choice. Maybe beginning to feel some feeling in your sides. You might want to stay on one side, or you may want to switch multiple times. That's also your choice. And whenever you're ready, at your own time, maybe starting to guide yourself back toward the meeting. But that process also, that transition is your choice too. So you may want to add something, kind of attending to your body in that way. That may be enough. Or you may want to revisit one of those shapes. So coming back to the meeting or shifting your attention is really your choice. And you can take your time with that. Welcome again, everybody. So that's a way to show, a way of arriving, a way of showing up from like an embodied place. And my name is Dave Emerson. Here's more of the frontal lobe parts. I'm here as a person first, but I'm also the co-director of the Center for Trauma and Embodiment, and that's, we're kind of your host group for today. But I do want to say that I don't speak for everybody here, and I don't want to be representing the voices of everybody in my group. So really intentionally showing up here today as a person, as an individual, but recognizing how we all intersect in this conversation as it unfolds. As I'm thinking about this topic, so we have a name, non-toxic masculinity. Thinking about it personally, having conversations with Ranjeev and Mosen over the past couple weeks, jotting down my notes. I decided to give myself permission to not have anything wise to say. Um, and, for me, the process of showing up together for this conversation is really the value of what's happening. That said, to take on some kind of perspective here, I'm making an effort to understand some of what I've learned personally about masculinity and how that's showing up for me. Some of the thoughts that have been coming up are it's been difficult for me to separate my ideas of masculinity from my ideas of maleness. And where I'm at in my life at this point, I'm comfortable understanding male, female as the binary that I've been really kind of cooked in as a total ideology. At this point in my life, I understand that as a fiction that we've been telling for reasons that we tell each other stories. So just to name that, at least this is for me personally, understanding the difference between maleness and masculinity is something that I'm really still working with and kind of struggling with. I have more comfort saying the gender binary is a fictional ideology than I do being able to say the same thing about masculinity. I'm just not fully there yet. But I do want to name that. And to give some context for that, for me, the sort of framing that comes up is I went to an all boys school for these key years of my life. So ages 13 to 18. And as I'm thinking about that time, this is in the 1980s as well. So I don't know if it's still kind of organized in the same way, but my experience both, I think at the time and also definitely reflecting back, is there was an attempt to eradicate the female from the space, but also an attempt to eradicate the feminine from the space. So the physical presence of girls or female people in the space was essentially eradicated, but also the experience of how, as I would sort of filter it over time, of femininity or feminine kind of dynamics. How did that show up for me? I experienced this as as a violent place, where violence was acceptable, both corporal punishment from the adults in the space, but also from the ways we were trained to deal with each other as kids. If you've ever read Lord of the Flies or anything like that, you get a pretty decent idea about what kind of environment this was. And I would say that it's not at all atypical, at least in my world. So the other thing I'm dancing with here is wanting to be cognizant of the world that I'm in. I also live in a country that created the ideology of race, and particularly race as a way of uh, creating a hierarchy of value for human beings. So as I'm aware of the fact that as I'm being trained in the ideology of masculinity and maleness, I'm also being trained in the ideology of race. And I know at this point that those things can't be separated. For the purpose of this conversation, I'm kind of making an effort to separate it a little bit just so we can like talk about masculinity a little. But if the conversation does want to be more expansive, I'm totally open to that too. Um, but thinking about those framing around feminine, female, and femininity being eradicated from the space and what that felt like, learning to cope with a sort of a context where competition and violence were predominant in terms of, sort of moving through that the time and the space there. So for me, as I've gotten older and begun to get more kind of perspective on this, and I think parenthood, for I know for the three of us, we've been talking about this, is a really organizing principle and experience. And for me, for sure, like being pushed as a parent of a boy, to start to look more deeply here, I've become more committed to what I understand at this point as vulnerability, tenderness, and discomfort. And for me, all of them are combined. Vulnerability and tenderness are connected to discomfort for me. And I think that's, I'm telling you part of my story, this 13 to 18 year kind of space. But I think the learning that I absorbed around masculinity was deficient in vulnerability and tenderness. So intentionally approaching vulnerability and tenderness as a space of growth for myself is uncomfortable. But I've started to trust that discomfort as a sign that I'm doing the right thing. A certain kind of discomfort. Still coming to terms with that, still learning. And let's see if I have anything else I can share just by way of introduction. I think that is maybe enough for now. I mean, there's more to unpack, but just to kind of set the tone why I'm here. And, we're aware as people that are in the space of mental health care or person care, that there is a crisis of mental health sort of pain and suffering in the community of male identified people. That goes for boys, young men, men of all ages. And there is also an attempt to capture what masculine means. This conversation's probably always been going on forever and ever, but at this moment in time, there's a loud voices that are claiming that space. And at least for myself, part of the motivation here is to push back on that a little bit, right? To just raise some other perspectives about what it could mean to embody masculine energy in other ways. And not to the exclusion, right? Like for me, always going back to having masculine energy doesn't mean eradicating the feminine, which was a key training that I got. I was trained to eradicate the feminine dynamic, and that's very cultural too. So with that kind of rambling introduction, I'll turn it over to anybody who wants to go next.
Mosen, want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Mosen Mohi Ud Din. I'm the founder and CEO of MeWe International. More importantly, I'm a father of four. I'm a husband. My family comes from Kashmir, the embattled region of Kashmir. And I'm here because I've never actually had an intentional space to restory and reimagine what masculinity is. Because I've, like many, by the way, happy Juneteenth to everybody. This is an important historical day and moment to reflect on Juneteenth. Um, Related to Juneteenth, I just growing up in the States, from the culture that I grew up in, especially as son of immigrants, I never had the safe space and intentional space to explore masculinity. Also because most of my childhood was, as some of us probably here, was just constant survival mode, and trying to protect myself, and having all of these categories and conditions and identities constantly being imposed on me by a culture that was trying to put me in one box. And it's not until that I had children of my own that I started to unlearn and go into the mystery of it all and give myself that permission. So I'm here because I've never been in a space like this to actually have a conversation. I think one thing that's really important is that this is a community conversation. Like everybody that's here is going to contribute their perspectives. And just to remember that there's a saying that language was meant to be a continuation of things, not a conclusion to things. And I think we should really hold that in our hearts as we explore this topic, because it's a sensitive topic, to lean into that. The language and how we define it is also ours. These aren't fixed, static things. These are continuations. And this is a process of continuation, which I'm very grateful to have with all of you. So that's why I'm here. And I have a lot of thoughts and ideas to share once we get officially started, but I'm going to toss it off to my brother, Ranjeev.
Well, thanks, Mosen. So I'm Ranjeev Benjamin, and let's see, I'm a cisgendered male, and currently serve as the executive director of mental wellness for the YMCA of the North Shore. So I'm up in Boston, the Boston area of Massachusetts, and I think, like Dave said, just to clarify that I'm not speaking for the YMCA. I'm just speaking for myself here. I am also a husband and a father of twin girls who will turn 12 next month. And really just somebody who's continually trying to grow and figure out how to show up in the world for myself, for my family, for my community. I think, like Mosen said, I've also never really had an intentional conversation about masculinity. It's never been an invitation, so I'm excited for this opportunity. But it feels like it matters so much right now to have this conversation. I think for me, I think about masculinity as this combination of nature and nurture, but also a lot of personal choice And I grew up in a lot of different cultures. My family moved around from England to India. I was in the Emirates and moved to the US when I was 17. And I absorbed all these different mixed messages about what it meant to be a good man. And for me, growing up was really confusing. I just couldn't figure out what it meant to be a good person, a good man in the world. And I feel like right now this idea of masculinity is being redefined in a lot of ways. And as Dave said, there are these loud voices out there offering boys and men direction, but a lot of them seem to be still around control and dominance and emotional suppression. And I know my experience is that these voices are being amplified by some of our social media, the algorithms on social media. And my worry is that these voices are resonating not because they're healthy, but because there's a void of anything better, And so I think we need more of these conversations. Just guys, I think all people just try to talk about like what do we do here? How can we live a better life here? And Dave, I think I mentioned this to you the other day. Like I struggle a little bit with the term toxic and non-toxic masculinity. Like it creates a binary in my mind, and it's almost feels like either you're toxic or you're not toxic. And I know for myself, I live on a spectrum. Like I'm like a lot of men. I've absorbed these messages over time, and I'm not one or the other. I'm just trying to navigate as best I could and learn and grow and kind of make space for reflection and conversation. And I think for me, I definitely am not an expert. I'm trying to come here with full humility and an open heart, but also recognizing that I come from a relative place of privilege. I have not lived in a place of war or displacement. I know for a lot of men in this world, um, they may have to embody certain roles just to survive or to protect themselves or their families. And so I think in my mind, this conversation is less about prescribing a way, but just opening up a space to get to listen, to share, and really to expand what's possible.
Yeah, thanks everybody. That's great. I just want to just mention we have the chat. We have a big group. We can always interact that way. We're trying to find words as individuals here, but I think as Mosen said, we're finding words collectively as well. So feel free to use the chat if that's helpful in any way. If folks want to say anything as well, you can let us know. Just indicate with however you want, a little hand raise, whatever is helpful. But I'm wondering if as everybody's sort of thinking and getting oriented, there's another way to get started. We've all mentioned that we're parents, we're caregivers, and I think as we've been having these conversations the past few weeks, I think we've all recognized that becoming a caregiver in that particular way, and there isn't only one way, right? We can acknowledge that there are many ways to be caregivers, and this is coming up from Jessica here too, is the experience of being fathers has changed our relationship to ourselves and probably like to what it means, what masculinity is in some way. So that could be a doorway for us to sort of enter the conversation, and invitation from Jessica too. Mosen, I don't know, you told me a story yesterday. I don't know if that's one you want to bring in now around some feedback you got from one of your children that I've been thinking about.
Yeah. No, yeah, I learned from a medicine man in the Andes. His name is Puma. He always taught us that children are our oracles. And there was I can pinpoint the moment I started to realize the urgency with which I had to reassess the power dynamics and my identity in the masculine realm and how I was living that out, because my son, my eldest son, who at the time was like 7, um, made a comment to my wife, and it kind of broke me open. And he said, I don't want to grow up to be a man. And my wife, Amber, was like, well, why? You know, what's wrong? And he said, every man I see around me is angry all the time. And every man I see around me looks tired and angry all the time. And I don't want to be that. And that kind of cracked me open, and it freaked me out. And I started thinking about how I was looking at, this thing we call masculinity, and what my models were for that growing up. And it really was heartbreaking once you start looking at it, especially from the perspective of someone who comes from an immigrant community, who's a person of color, growing up in the States, living in Georgia. Um, he was right. He was absolutely right. Um, and the urgency then comes to, well, what do we need to change, and what do I need to switch so that we don't pass these things on to our children and perpetuate these cycles of suffering and dominance and injustice and inequality. And one of the things that helped me was, looking to our wisdom keepers. And again, it happens to be, Juneteenth today, but so we should, it's a good moment to just look at the wisdoms of people like Bell Hooks, you know. And she had a really beautiful quote um, that I went to that gave me some peace of mind, or gave me a compass or a direction. And with your permission, I'd love to read it to the group. Um, she wrote that the wounded child inside many males is a boy who, when he first spoke his truths, was silenced by paternal sadism, by a patriarchal world that did not want him to claim his true feelings. The wounded child inside many females is a girl who was taught from early childhood that she must become something other than herself, deny her true feelings in order to attract and please others. When men and women punish each other for truth-telling, we reinforce the notion that lies are better. To be loving, we willingly hear the other's truth, and most important, we affirm the value of truth-telling. Lies may make people feel better, but they do not help them to know love. And that really kind of framed for me what the path as well as the destination is for me in my journey in, again, this thing we call masculinity, whatever that is. But if I'm speaking from the lens of fatherhood, um, the way that I had to survive abuse, the way that I had to survive violence from war, the way I had to survive a very conservative spirituality frame um, that was very focused on guilt and shame. The way I had to survive those things, my fuel for survival was anger. Anger is what helped me break through. And now I'm realizing I have to change the fuel system here. And it's very much connected in my mind to this energy or thing we call masculinity. The fuel source has to be clean energy. And for me, it's like switching, from gas to electric, or solar. If we're talking about light, and that's love and compassion and self-compassion. Um, in my moments of fatherhood, I'm a father to 2 boys and 2 girls. And I realized early on that my reactions, my legitimate reactions, to this broken world, was actually modeling and passing on these cycles of inequality and categories and binaries to my children. And the starting point was self-compassion over self-judgment for me. Giving myself the compassion, and I'm working on that every day, by the way. I don't have it all figured out, but giving myself the self-compassion so that that I didn't have when I was a child, that a lot of boys, a lot of young men don't have. I've worked in over 20 countries, served over 20,000 people, and a lot of them are young men and boys. And the most dangerous thing I see in the world that is connected to this topic, which for me is just about inequality, is there are these arrested narratives in a lot of boys and young men that will translate to an arrested development of those boys and young men. And that arrested development of those boys and young men is going to arrest the human rights and healing of an entire community. Everything is interdependent to the other, all living things. And I think this is a really big challenge we're facing, especially in this country right now, is that. And there's actually a recent study, it was published in the New York Times about, I'm referencing it right now, it's about girls outpacing boys in kindergarten skills. And this is a study that was done for children ages 3 to 5 who are considered on track for kindergarten. And one of the biggest gaps between girls and boys, if you look at the categories that they measured in this study, was social and emotional skills and control of emotions and behavior. Those were two of the biggest gaps that they could see where girls were outpacing boys: social and emotional skills and control of emotions and behavior. And I find that really interesting. And it all goes back to what my son, it kind of relates to what my, at that time, 7-year-old son observed about the world around him, that there are a lot of men in this world who are angry and tired. And we have to ask ourselves why. And we have to make space to address those issues. For me, yes, a lot of it comes from systemic inequality and injustice and generational trauma that goes to the systems and to politics. We can't separate social justice and politics from mental health. But it also has to do with what's within me that I need to talk back to and restory. And for me, it came down to self-compassion and having to create an algorithm within myself for that so that I could give that to my children. So yeah, that's my initial thought. And Bell Hooks kind of called it out too. I mean, what is it all about? It's about love. And there are not a lot of spaces I had growing up where I was with a bunch of boys or men talking about love. I don't know about the brothers with me on this call, but that was not normal for me. So there's a conscious effort for me as a father to really talk about and learn and make it a continuation of language for what that means with my sons and with my daughters. And they're kind of teaching me more. They're parenting me in many ways, as the saying goes with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I relate so much to so much of what you said, Wilson. And for me too, I think being a caregiver, being a parent, created space for tenderness and love that allowed me to also recognize that how stunted my emotional capacity was. And one of the stories that keeps coming up for me, one of the things that made me be like, okay, I need to check this out. And for me, actually, therapy has been really helpful. Is if my son was a skateboarder and I wasn't, so I learned about this whole world from him, which is an incredible world that I love, that I'm so grateful for in so many ways. But when he would fall, my instinct was, you're gonna be fine. Just get right up. You're good. And I I noticed myself doing that every single time. Like that would be my response. And I started to try to unpack it myself, you know. I think this is coming from a place of love and care. I don't want him to be hurt. I do anything I could do to make sure this person is not hurt. But I think what was happening was I was expressing my lack of capacity to be nuanced. Like for one thing, like I only had access to kind of a limited range of emotions. Speaking about anger, that was tolerated. Like in my, in that same schooling I was talking about, anger was an acceptable emotion and actually probably the only one of the only ones. Entitlement also, again, being trained to be a white person as well. Um, but I think what happened with me as a father was like, I love this person with a tenderness that I can't express in words. And when he falls, how do I express my love? Get up, son. Not in a harsh way necessarily, but just like you're gonna be fine. Shake that off, move on, you know? And to me, that was one of those moments like, okay, yeah, I need to learn. And maybe this is correlates to your kind of self-compassion, one of those moments. I I did approach it as I recognize the tendency to be sort of to punish myself for having a limited scope of capacity. But I think the reason I was able to seek support was I had space for self-love. Like I want to be able to be tender and loving with this person, and I need to do some work to get there. So really relating to what you're saying.
This reminds me of a memory that I have. So I must have been, I don't know, 7, 8 years old. I used to take piano lessons, and I had this female teacher. And at the start of my lesson, I got my finger jammed in the piano bench. I think that's how the seat lifts up. And I had this huge blood blister at the tip of my finger, like painful blood blister. And I did my entire hour lesson with that blood blister. Like I didn't say a word to the teacher. And now I think, as a social worker, now I think back, oh my gosh, what did this little kid think about vulnerability, or especially in front of a woman, right? To stop and say, I'm in pain here and I can't go on. And for me, that was a lot of these more subtle, keep it together, be tough, kind of keep your emotions under control, don't show any vulnerability. A lot of my schooling, the leadership was really more around command and control, whether it was Catholic school and the female nuns versus in India where it was the headmasters, corporal punishment. It was really about fear, demanding compliance, obedience, like absolutely no softness, no vulnerability. But for me, what was interesting is that at home, my dad, while he's very emotionally reserved, he is probably one of the kindest, most patient gentlemen that I've ever known. And he really modeled for me a different way of being a man, not through dominance, but really being steady and being calm. But my family's, like in terms of gender roles, both my grandmothers were educated school teachers in India in the 1940s and 50s. My mother, like my dad, were both medical doctors. And for many years, my mom actually made a lot more money than my dad did. And so it was a sort of a different sense of being a provider in my household, which was contradicting what I heard from the world outside. And it really, I think for me, showed me that this sort of providing and protecting can be a little nuanced and doesn't have to be so gender based, gender specific. But for sure, I think as a parent, especially of two girls, it's made me think a lot about this. I'm the only man in the house, right? That's my wife and my two kids. But really to sort of think about myself and how I show up for my kids. They call me soft serve because I'm the easier parent, and that's a bit of an issue. Get myself in trouble there. But we had this conversation recently where there's a lot of "I love you" in the household, but my dad never said that to me, and I'd mentioned that to my kids. They just could not wrap their mind around it. He's never said, 50 years, it's never come out of his mouth, and it's such an alien concept, but also healing for me in the same time, as they sort of recognized that I had missed something in my own childhood by them seeing it and witnessing that. There was something very, very powerful in that moment.
I had the same experience, Ranjeev, and as a practice, I've started to, every time I see my son, I've been forcing myself for years to say I love you every time, and because I have to. It's not something that I internalized either from men. So I feel very it's kind of emotional to hear you say that because I can relate, and I
Yeah.
appreciate that you brought that in. Mosen, feel free to jump in, and also want to just turn to the group, right? Invite folks. If you we all talked about this the past few weeks. We showed up here together to have this conversation and hold the space, but we also, because we don't, you're showing up here today, whoever you are and however you are, and you may feel like you want to speak into this space, or you may not. Part of our responsibility is to hold this space, but we do want to make sure we're inviting folks here to join in if you like. Yeah.
Well, I just had one more thing to add. Another catalyst for this journey of restoring what masculinity can be or is, whatever it is, um, for me, has been my wife. And I'm in a mixed race marriage and a mixed religion as well. And there's been a lot of uneasy moments where I've had to get called out for you just don't know what you don't know. And I've had to get called out for how I was entering arguments or conflicts um, as a man, whatever that is, to a woman, someone who identifies as a woman. Um, and the conversations always went back to body language, if I'm being honest. Most of what we understand from one another as human beings comes from body language. And I just had no idea, even with my daughters, who I have conversations with about what makes them feel safe when they talk to me and what doesn't make them feel safe when they talk to me. Just even having those conversations, I think, is so important. Um, the tone of voice, the rhythm of my breathing, how I'm standing or sitting, or my eye contact, like all these things really matter. And I was so unaware of that. And you could call it part of being aware of your masculinity or just being aware of being a human being and how we connect and hold one another with compassion and respect and dignity. Um, and that's just something that's really opened up for me as well. And it even goes as deep as not being afraid to cry in front of my children, or not being afraid to ask for advice from my children, or having conversations with my wife in front of our children about what's happening in the world, and them hearing her viewpoint, you know what I mean? And me just shutting up and listening, especially when it comes to the erosion of women's rights in this country and LGBTQ rights in this country. I mean, so I think those things are really important too. And body language was a big one for me.
Yeah. I can so relate too. I just somebody, Courtney here. If everybody can see the chat, but I'll read this. Courtney heard bell hooks mentioned, and thanks for that, Mosen, too, by the way. What a great voice to bring in here. And for Courtney, they've been thinking a lot about the intersection of masculinity and queerness and how queerness challenges masculinity and simultaneously liberates it as well. I can so relate to that too. And here's another parenthood thing is, so my son is 24. Two of my closest friends are right at my age, and we all have kids in our 20s, their 20s. And learning from these kids about gender fluidity and just has been a gift that I can't put words to once again, right? Just to learn about this thing that I thought was so binary that I was trained to grasp so hard and, stake everything in is just not true. And there's a liberation for us as parents, like, when the three of us talk, let's say the parents talk, um, we're all, I'd say, I think of this as I don't know, one of the things I appreciate about myself, I think, is my devotion to protect, learning that protection doesn't have to be violence, but just my commitment to protect is one way I relate to myself. And so with these kids, I'm committed to protecting them in this world. Like I want to make this world safe for them. So entering into the relationship with that intention, then I get to learn, what does protection mean? What does it mean? How do I let go of my assumptions? How do I stand beside? Right. And so Courtney, I really appreciate what you're saying here. And feel free to elaborate if you like at any point. Mindy, as someone who identifies as a woman, I'm finding this conversation quite emotional. A space that I've not been in. Same, Mindy, and I think Mosen, maybe we all mentioned this. I've never had this opportunity either. I'm going to be 56 in a couple weeks. These are things I think that are intentionally kept outside of the realm of language. Mosen, I don't know how you relate to that as a storyteller, but I think the purpose of things like this are to remain unnamed, to be their embodied experiences that remain unspoken, and so much of the power is there. So just by our act of coming together to find language, I think it is a revolutionary act in context. It's part of the process of healing more broadly, maybe. But yeah, Mindy, I agree. It's an unusual thing to be doing. Just reading through powerful exploration, I appreciate so much the openness and insight. Every time I'm in a space where men are willing to share, I'm healed. Thank you, Jessica, for naming that. Can you elaborate? Courtney, yes, please. Feel free to elaborate. Mindy, can you unmute? I think we set it up so that everybody's muted as we come in, but can you unmute?
I just unmuted everyone, so someone wants to
Okay,
raise their hand or speak.
awesome. Courtney, feel free if you like.
Unmute. Okay. All right. Are y'all able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I just stepped off the side of the road. I'm walking to the barbershop. First off, appreciate you all for putting this conversation together. This is something that actually a woman sent to me just to be able to sit into and participate in. Like, it feels very aligned with where I am in life. I have, as a cisgendered, heterosexual Black man, I'm 36 years old. I've learned so much from queerness, queer spaces, learning from women, learning from the experiences of people who live life in a way that's different than I am. And part of that has been vulnerability, being able to express and experience emotions, because perhaps these spaces, there had to be so much challenge in order for them to achieve the point that they are, in order to be able to confidently express themselves and be who they are in their identities. And the creation of that space and the conflict and the pressures and the fights for the rights, all of that I feel like has brought together community. And what I'm learning for myself through queerness is that my own identity, my masculinity has been very much reshaped in a way that I wish that I was able to put language together to express to men, hey, here's what we have to learn from queerness. And I look at the messaging as an example from it being Pride Month as well as Men's Mental Health Month. The messaging is so different. And this could be different on everybody's algorithm, but on one end you have for Pride, like we're celebrating, right? And there's also, politically, there are so many things happening where this community is coming together, not just in the sense of, hey, this is fun, but also, hey, here are these important things that we're also part of. And then on the men's side, it's, hey, man, you're alone, you're sad, talk to somebody. And it's very, the energy behind it is very low and different. And I do believe that somehow being able to bridge this together and I think creates more of that vulnerability that we're looking for from men to be able to collectively be able to come together and just make for a better world that we should be and can be living in. So my elaboration is really just that. For myself in my work, I've been challenged to look at intersectionality, and I look at my masculinity, my straightness, and I'm like, wow, I've actually learned a lot more about myself in queer communities or from my queer friends who have challenged that. And again, it's just been such a liberating process that I think that in 2025, the validation of masculinity or manhood looks significantly different than divide, conquer, be better than, compete, perform. And so much of it is about presence. And that's what I think is really missing as far as how we can create change. Okay, I'll stop there.
Don't stop.
Yeah, keep going, Courtney. That's amazing. Thanks so much for being here. So grateful that you're here.
Thank you.
Man, Courtney, thank you. I mean, I'm taking notes and learning. I mean, that's what's so beautiful about this is that we're learning from each other. We're each a continuation of one another. And so that was really beautifully said. And you just taught me something. And you mentioned intersectionality. I think that's so beautiful. And that's on all of us. And I need to step into that for myself and my own identity. So thank you for that wisdom. And you mentioned something about vulnerability, which I think is so key. And this concept of, at least in my upbringing and in this world of masculinity, of kindness being considered weakness. And in this country right now, there's a tone of that kindness is a weakness. Even people suggesting that there's too much empathy, which is troubling. So parts of what you're saying, Courtney, really reminded me of that. And that was beautifully said. So thank you, man, for that wisdom.
Thank you.
Yeah, same, Mosen. I was responding to that too, and I think and then to carry on with what you just said. So when you were talking, Courtney, I was thinking about how your kind of call to community was really resonates, and also how what's the word, in conflict it is with what I learned about maleness and masculinity, which was do it alone. Like, and I'm thinking about Ranjeev's comment about not sharing, not reaching out, not asking for help. I got that training explicitly and implicitly, like, in terms of what it means to show up in the world. And I think you're 100% right. It feels, or I should say for myself, I'm at a place and where that feels completely incongruent with growth and with who I want to be as a person. So finding that alternative, right? To do it alone, you can take care of everything, you got this, or nobody else does. That sort of mentality. So I'm really glad you brought that in. I can relate to that. And most of the, the idea that we really need to be called to vulnerability in ways that are, or that vulnerability and tenderness is a strength, it's such an important thing you said. It feels real too. Once you get at least, past a certain point, the illusion that strength is violence, like just for me, or anger, let's say, anger and violence. Once you crest that ridge, speaking for myself, it's so clear that vulnerability is strength. But it's still, I'll speak for myself too, finding, access to that, that's the life's work at this point. Like that's long-term life.
Can I, Amaranta
Yeah, please.
raise their hands? Yeah.
Yes, hi. Yeah, first, yeah, thank you for being here. It feels so good to just feel you three expressing yourselves. I just wanted to share two things. One was around, well, I am a cisgender woman. I've grown with a dad whom I saw not a lot, but he, in times he protected me somehow, but I felt this protection he wanted to give me was from his idea of what needed to be protected, not like in an attuned way of what I really needed. And somehow growing up, I am 40 almost, I will turn 44 this year. I am much more aware of what kind of, at least lack, even sometimes damage, it made not to feel that he was feeling me. Like, he was there when he was, but he was not really there. He was not like attuned. I don't have another word. And so I feel something around men deepening their capacity of attunement is really beautiful as a starting place. And well, maybe I'm wrong, but I relate that more to a feminine kind of, energy. And also the second thing was around anger and rage somehow. I am being very curious around grief work, and I am discovering, reading, Francis Weller, Stephen Levin, that behind anger and grief and rage is so much grief, and that is like so infinite that it would really be like very interesting to put some awareness on that and maybe talk about it. It's usually quite unseen, but or unfelt, but it's really, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amaranta. And I'm aware of, so I'd like to give us opportunity to respond. And I also, as the host, I'm just aware of the time and respecting everybody's time and energy and space. We do have to bring it to a close, but it may be the kind of conversation we might want to pick up again at some point. But does anybody want to just respond to that invitation to consider what Amaranta brought in here? Attunement as a practice.
I know for me, it's a life's work, right? Sort of showing up, being present, catching my thoughts when I'm distracted, especially as a parent, just thinking about a sort of father, and how as men, there are certain emotions that are off limits. Like when we're not allowed to show them. I was just thinking about Dave, what he said earlier about the eradication of feminism and femininity as you were growing up in school. But there are certain aspects of masculinity that are eradicated too. Like we're not allowed to show them. These are certain emotions, and that we are been taught that it's not okay. And even thinking about vulnerability for myself, there are moments where even with women, and my personal experience also as a therapist, there are so many women who don't know what to do with a man who shares his emotions. There's this awkwardness because, women have also been taught the same scripts that we have, and there's moments for me, there's shame, there's embarrassment. I catch myself, don't do it again. But I think, when we're all in this together, in this work together.
I was just gonna add lots of beautiful points and wisdom. Again, we're all adding to this continuation of expanding the language of what this can be. I think you threw in some more spices and ingredients into it. And it just made me reflect, like, I think a lot of us in the realm of masculinity, there was a lot more learning and modeling for how to get and how to produce than learning how to lose and learning how to carry loss. And if I'm even looking at my two sons, just how, like, the things that they're learning in school and what their friends are talking about, it's about getting and how to get. And yeah, I think it's a really important point, like learning and exploring how to hold loss, which is an inevitable part of life and being a human being and being a living thing on this planet. So yeah, I think that's huge.
All right, everybody. Yeah, this is, thank you for showing up for this conversation. And maybe this is the kind of thing that we all get to continue in our own worlds, in our own spaces. Maybe it's something we can host again here. But just want to say how grateful I am, Ranjeev and Mosen, for showing up here.
What a pleasure.
It's a deep thing to do, and I really appreciate both of you so much. And honestly, like getting to know both of you the past year made this possible. So thank you. Thanks to everybody else.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, sorry. Wishing you all the best and take good care.
Blessings.
Blessings, yeah. Thank you, Mosen. Thank you, Dave.
Blessings, Ranjeev. Thank you, Dave, for creating the space, brother.
Thanks for being here. Be
Bye,
well.
everybody.
Touch soon. Take care.